you've got, so it's
Good morning. Good morning.
Hey, JJ.
How's everybody doing? Matt Mienka, haven't seen you on a call in so long. Good to see you.
No, my team's out today, so I'm working from home.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Zoe will be excited that you're on the call. She'll be here in a moment. Yeah, good to see that a lot more people are tuning in again.
Yeah, it's good to see everybody.
Yeah, awesome. Great stuff. Yeah, we've got a ton of questions. Looks like Coach Drew is here to assist. Drew, how you doing, man? Drew just had a baby.
Well, physically didn't have
Not
the baby,
physically, but
good, very good. Very tired, but everyone is healthy and happy, and everything is good. Life is good.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear. That's really great to hear. How long are you going to be out of the office for?
I'm probably gonna work a couple days a week at the run shop for the next 3 weeks or so, just like on busy days. Like on Mondays, we order a ton of stuff, and so I like to supervise that. And then we receive all that ton of stuff typically on Friday. So I will be working pretty much Mondays and Fridays for a while, which gives me a lot of time to do my coaching stuff, which is awesome because I can finally like get ahead of the curve.
Yeah, which I feel like is always really important. One of the reasons why like I always push to work on Sundays. It's like if I don't, then I start the week behind, and then I always get really stressed about it. So yeah, I think that like staying ahead of it is like so important. Your circumstances, it might be a little bit harder to do that, but I'm glad that you're able to take some time off work and that you've got that flexibility. I'm sure that Alicia is also extremely appreciative of that.
She used to joke that we were just going to have a baby so that she could go on maternity leave because she loves it so much. Like I don't think she's going to go back to work until December. So she's like in a good place right now, especially when she's got that little baby curled up on her chest. She's just infatuated. So everything's really awesome right now.
How's Brady doing with new little brother?
Good. She's like super crazy psycho, like excited, she just wants to like hug him and jump on him and hold him, and we're just like, easy. Like he literally doesn't know how to like move his hands yet. Like he's still learning his body, just like the rest of us, really, I guess. But she's just sweet. It really melts your heart to see them together.
That's awesome. Heck yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, we've got quite a few questions. Yeah, sorry, our dog, she likes to try to fit in.
She's like stretched out as long as possible under both our chairs, looking up at us like.
And we have a bunch of chargers down there, so she just kind of like hits them against the wall. It's a little distracting. Cool. We have a bunch of questions we want to get to today. I feel like we've been averaging like 3 to 4 on these calls, which, yeah, we're not glossing over these topics. Let's just say that. So whatever we don't cover today, we'll try to ideally get in Monday. Next week is a big moving week for us. So there's a small possibility we might have to cancel the call on Monday. Just a heads up, guys.
This coming Monday?
Yeah, we're moving next week.
Right.
Yeah.
Monday should be fine.
If my stress levels go up and I need the extra hour, I'm gonna take it. Just giving you guys a heads up, because I'm kind of been the primary packer lately. Zoe's adjusting to a new role at Trail Runner and really crushing at that, but we're getting used to a whole new I feel like a little bit of a new office hours.
Kind of showed up like first day on the job and was like, oh my God, I actually don't know how to make a magazine. It's been like really interesting to like actually do that part of it. Cause like I feel like I understand all the conceptual parts of it, but I've had to learn like a whole new Adobe program for like editing, like the actual, like how you see things on the page. And even though like I always edit things before they go in the magazine, there's so many little tweaks, like, making sure you don't have a line in the magazine. It only has like 1 or 2 words on it, making sure it like visually looks good on the page, which like adds another element to just like, does it read well? You have to take something, like usually you get something from a freelancer and it's like good, then you need to like take it and make it read really well and make sense. And then you have to actually put it on the page and be like, does that sentence look weird next to that photo?
I thought
like,
the art director does the layout.
She does she picks the visuals, but I make sure the text like flows well, reads well. Like you don't want there to just be like one sentence under a photo.
Mhm.
So like what that, like if there's like one sentence that's kind of by itself, we call that an orphan. You have to go back in through the text and delete something else just to make sure that that doesn't happen. Or what you do is like a fun trick is you just like make the spaces between letters infinitesimally smaller and like hope that that like shrinks it, or you can grow it, and it's very complicated.
It sounds really time consuming,
It's
like very detail oriented.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. Well, that's a whole new thing.
Yeah.
Definitely
So
weren't
if the
doing
next
that
issue
before.
of Trail Runner looks totally bananas.
Also, I thought you told me that all of the issues of Trail Runner for like the year were already done, and now all of a sudden you're making a magazine like on your first week of the job.
I mean, this one is for fall. This is our last one of the year.
This is for fall.
Yeah.
It's
like
not
so
even
far in
August yet.
advance. Yeah.
Okay. All right. The fall runner's guide's coming out.
Yeah.
It's summer.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to fall temperatures personally.
Yeah, this one's going to be really cool. We have an awesome David Roche feature, and then there's a story, like an environmental story about a guy that ran across the boundary waters with Claire Gallagher.
Oh, that's cool.
It's so awesome. It's going to be a baller issue. An amazing piece from Kylee about carbohydrates that she finished at like 8:00 last night. So crushing it in all ways.
Nice work, Kylie. Awesome. Well, this is the summer issue. No, that was the fall
That was
issue.
the fall issue.
But
The summer issue came out.
But
a
we're
month
in
ago.
summer adventure season right now. So we can start off with the question about summer running. The author of this question is very excited about summer running. She freaking loves it, as she says here. But last week I encountered a moose on the trail, and a friend of mine spotted a mountain lion in the same area. I often run with my dogs on the trails, but when those runs are 15 plus miles, I don't bring my dog along. Do you have any good tips for trail safety when you're out alone?
I love this. So, I mean, I think an important thing is like, don't let wildlife be a deterrent from like getting out there and doing stuff. We have a 100% success rate of not having athletes die. So like the chance, like even though anytime someone does get attacked by a mountain lion or a moose, it's like obviously all that trail runners can talk about, or runners generally can talk about for like months. It's so rare. So like, in terms of risk, it's pretty small, but some things you can do to increase your chances of not getting eaten by a mountain lion or a bear or a moose. Like if I'm out there on my own without a dog or without a TJ, I'll just like play music on my cell phone, and that can be like, that's something I'll do in an area where I'm unlikely to see other people, because it's very rude to play music. Like it's actually against leave no trace principles. It's sound pollution technically, but playing music or a podcast or an audiobook or something out loud on your phone can be a way of warning wildlife, like, okay, something's coming. I don't want to get involved with, this person who's blasting Lil Kim on their cell phone. And that can be pretty effective. Bear, it's kind of like a bear bell that you can turn on and off and is much less annoying.
I feel like I get really nervous about doing my runs alone out in the woods. I don't like it at all.
I mean, my counterpoint to that is like,
edge, like the whole
let's say
time.
I'm with you. What do you think I'm going to do if you get attacked by a mountain lion?
I don't know. It's
like,
just
I'll
like
just be a
less
witness?
likely to be attacked if there's more people.
Yeah. I mean, but like it just like a little bit. I think it's, it's kind of more of like a mental, like when I was a backpacking guide, we used to, we would carry what we called a kitty be cool tool, because we'd often be hiking on our own in canyons in New Mexico that were in mountain lion territory. So it's like I would, hike around with like a large stick, and I can guarantee that that did a lot more for my mental state than it ever would have had I actually encountered a mountain lion.
Well, I feel like the likelihood of encountering, big wildlife like a moose, a bear, mountain lion, it's pretty rare. I mean,
Pretty rare.
I've
It does
never
happen,
encountered a
but
mountain lion, and I've done, hundreds of runs, but I have encountered bears a
Yeah.
couple times.
yeah.
Um,
And, I think, the encounters, like, you know, encounters are rare, and having an encounter that escalates to being a problem is even rarer, but you can, minimize the chance of encounters by like just being loud.
wow, Denzel has had a couple mountain lion encounters at night. Wow, okay. Well, at least they both just ran away and weren't interested in you. I've heard of people wearing their hat backwards with sunglasses on the back, to kind of like, I don't know, make it seem like maybe you're watching the mountain lions. I've seen actually a video of Sage Canaday, like he had a hat with he drew eyes on it on the back so he could wear it backwards when he's in kind of mountain lion country. Anyways, I definitely can empathize with the author of this question. I think sometimes like our fears aren't necessarily as well founded because the likelihood of seeing something out there is pretty low, and then something happening is probably even lower. But I feel for this person because I'm nervous on a lot of these runs, especially if I'm in unfamiliar place, like a place that I haven't run, many times. Like I tend to stick to like trails that I've been to a few times and I feel more comfortable with them, because if I'm going to like explore a new place, for example, last summer I went to Utah to visit my sister. She lives in Salt Lake. And I've heard that there are a lot of like snakes and a lot of mountain lions on those trails. And I was doing long runs and I was just like kind of a little nervous the whole time. And it like definitely brought down the quality of my runs, kind of elevated my heart rate a little bit, even though I was trying to run easy. Because there is kind of like an underlying anxiety. And I think that sometimes, when you're out there, almost those feelings are unavoidable. So try not to be judgmental for having them. Yeah, that's Zoe's very tough. She's not scared.
I'm
of
not tough.
anything.
It's just like I think people get anxious because they realize that they actually don't have that much control over the situation. Like if a mountain lion is going to attack you, there's so little you can do. Like there's just and I think that people's anxiety comes from knowing they don't have that much control over the situation. Like it's very unlikely that it will come to that. But if it does, I don't know, I guess that's the universe saying it's like, it's my time. Because there's no like thing, like there's no easy trick. There's like, love you, Sage Canaday, but I really don't think that that's a super effective way of like deterring attacks.
But whatever kind of like eases your
What
anxieties.
I'm saying is that like what you're doing likely won't have an actual effect on other than being loud, bringing a friend with you, running at safe times and in safe places. Like life is random, the universe is chaotic, everyone dies, hardly anyone dies from mountain lions, and that is an immutable truth, and do what you have to do to feel better about that, but there's very little you can do to change that actuality.
Okay, I'm not sure what to do with all of that. That was very logical self-talk. Great, Zoe. Yeah.
Like your fear is valid. Don't let it stop you from doing things, but also realize that you are likely not going to win against a bear, against a mountain lion. If you do, awesome. You're going to get some like baller, like you'll probably be on Good Morning America, like the guy from Fort Collins, but that's very rare. And it's just, these things are super, super rare. Take common sense precautions, but don't let it like dictate how you live your life.
I understand that like being out on the trail and encountering a large animal, whether it's a bear or mountain lion, it sounds like it's a fairly common occurrence based on our discussion here in the chat box and everything. But from like literally all I experience here in Arkansas are like deer and turtles. And so there's just not a whole lot to be afraid of. But like what are the, like how prevalent is an actual like attack? Are people afraid for like no reason, like swimming in the ocean. Everyone's afraid of sharks, but there's so few shark attacks for the number of people that are
You
out in the ocean.
are so much more likely to be hit by a car than have an encounter with a mountain lion. So like be afraid of cars. If you're a woman, be afraid of other people. You know, like in terms of the hierarchy of things that like statistically are shown, like this is, I think humans' brains are really bad at risk analysis. And I think that, you know, even having this conversation kind of reveals why. Like anytime you bring up to a runner, like start talking about mountain lions, they're going to bring up the 1 or 2 times that that has happened to them, which will cause you to actually think that it's more common than it is, even though that it's one encounter out of thousands and thousands of runs. So you're actually going to like like the discussions of mountain lion or bear encounters are overrepresented. Like if you had a discussion about the amount of times that you haven't encountered wildlife, like that's a much more common thing. Yeah, Krista says she brings bear spray. You know, there's certain places like when I've been in grizzly territory hiking, climbing or running, like that, you know, something that you could that would be advised. But, you know, in Colorado and in most of the US, like the most common bears are black and brown bears, which are pretty chill bears. They don't like, they're not, the only meat that they're eating is already dead meat. And I think that, you know, discussions around wildlife always kind of frustrate me because they're just like, they're genuine, like encounters are somewhat common. They're not as common as you might think, but you know, it's just like whenever you're hanging out with trail runners, if someone brings up, oh yeah, I saw a mountain lion, everyone in that circle is gonna be like, oh, that happened to me one time too. But they're not gonna say, oh, that didn't happen to me 9,099 times. So it's like, I think this discussion mostly just reveals how bad humans are at risk analysis, because like I'm definitely way more scared of cars. Like think about how many times you've had like a negative car encounter, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been crashed into.
But like I've definitely had times where I've been much closer to having like potentially getting injured from a car than from wildlife.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the thing, right? We're so
But
much
like,
more accustomed to driving, and so we can easily
yeah,
kind of like pass off those close calls. We just let them go, rather when we hear these stories about people getting, you know, having like encounters with mountain lions and whatnot, you know, dealing with cars and humans with consciousness behind the wheel of those cars. It's a lot easier to accept that, you know, those people can kind of right the ship. But with an animal, a wild animal, for example, you know, you don't exactly know how they're going to react to you or what they're going to do. So it's a lot, you know, a lot scarier. At least for me, you know, I definitely don't love to be out on a long run in an area.
yeah.
Where
And I
there's not a
think that
lot of
that's where it
people.
becomes like important to understand that something may feel scarier, but is it actually an increased risk to your safety? Minimal, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
And this is why I'm like no fun at parties.
let's move on to the next question.
In conclusion, you're probably fine. Take basic precautions.
In conclusion, I hear you and I validate your fears.
Yeah, your
I have
feelings are
them as
valid,
well.
but don't let them drive.
Oh, it's hard. It's very hard for me. Okay.
Again, we have a 100% success rate and no one being harmed by wildlife.
Oof, I had a close encounter with the bear. It was not fun. It was like 5 feet away from me on its hind legs and just luckily turned and went the other way. I thought we both like screamed as loud as we could. It was ever since that moment, I'm just like, I don't like going around corners in the forest.
Yeah, and that's why, again, like just playing some music out loud or even talking or singing to yourself is a great way of just like letting wildlife know, like, TJ coming through.
My vest has a whistle on it. I've never used it, but I always thought, oh,
you could be tooting on your whistle.
If like,
but also I feel like whistle
something happened.
I mean, you know, if you're feeling, you know, wigged out and you just need something to do to make yourself feel like you're taking precautions, like sure, toot on the whistle, but you know, those are typically, I think, intended for more like search and rescue purposes.
Whatever you got to do.
Whatever you got to do.
All right, cool. I really like this next training question. Don't remember who the author of this one was, but thank you for sending this in. Such a good question. I heard there should be a clear goal for each run we do. can you discuss the goals for each of the kinds of runs you put on our plans? Recovery, easy hills, strides, long runs, etc. We've actually done an entire Zoom call on this, so we're gonna probably not do that now in the interest
Hard
of
pivot.
time. But just to kind of like do the basics on this, yes, it's great to go into every single run that you do with an underlying intention. Obviously, the more purpose you bring into your training, the more you can get out of it. There are so many different kinds of runs that that we do, that you will do as an athlete training for a very specific goal, or in like a base building period, or working on your economy and whatnot. But there's some kind of like basic stuff for easy runs maybe that you can think about. Good underlying intention for an easy run is kind of like a conversational effort, very light, maybe a little bit of emphasis on quicker strides, so you're not feeling like you're plodding. Again, we want to reinforce kind of the neuromuscular adaptations that you're doing, that you're kind of provoking on your strides and on your hill work and in your workouts. We really want that to translate over to the easy run. So if you're plodding on your easy runs, you're not reinforcing good biomechanics, and you're not helping to develop the muscular pathways that we need. So again, light, quick, easy strides, a very conversational effort, kind of chit chatty is what we call it. And on most of those easy runs, like your legs shouldn't feel like there's a lot of resistance on them. So thinking about those things when you go out for your easy run is really going to keep you on track. If it's a recovery run, a prescribed recovery run, or a run at like maybe I like to use the cue like forever effort for a lot of my athletes, to get them to slow way down, because people tend, especially when you're newer to training, tend to run a lot of your runs too
My
fast.
athletes do genuine pace runs.
Genuine, perfect. Yeah. Check out. That was a blog post that we wrote, right?
Yep.
With all the music that goes with each run. Yeah, check that out. So they did an awesome job on that. For like those slower runs, like recovery, it's an effort. It's as slow as you can go without walking. I mean, it is so slow, but again, try to have the emphasis on some light strides. You can work on your turnover and things like that, even when you're going slow. For that forever pace, it's 4 sentences conversational. It's like if you're running for 60 minutes, it's a pace you could run for 3 hours. It's really something that you can hold for a long time. I like to think about when I go out on most of my easy runs, I'm like, this is 100-mile effort or 50-mile effort. It's like multiple hours, so easy. The breath is easy, like just kind of like just sinking into being out there and making sure that you're not adding more stress to your system. You're just staying consistent. Maybe Zoe, do you want to talk about, kind of some, I don't know, intention behind hills and strides?
Yeah, so, hills and strides are going to be most often seen in the context of an easy run. And this is, something I like to talk about with my athletes, is the concept of polarization, which is the idea that all of your running should either be really easy or quite hard. You want to avoid that gray area effort where it like feels hard, but you're not going that fast. And you're kind of like, it's just like, it doesn't feel easy. It doesn't feel hard. It doesn't feel that good. You're in that moderate effort, but like not on purpose. So it's like you're not tempoing, you're just kind of going hard for no reason and undermining the intent of the workout. So hills and strides are top end efforts, meaning you're like going like 9, 10 out of 10 effort, like maximum effort. And the idea there is that when you're going as fast as you can without sprinting, like it shouldn't feel like, don't picture Usain Bolt and like your muscles are straining and like your neck's popping out, your eyes are coming out and there's like saliva flying. That's like a little too hard. We want to find flow. We want to find ease. Our goal is always to make faster running feel easier, not to get good at running hard, because you can't run that hard for very long. Like if you think about trying to run a 5K or 100 miles, you can't run hard the whole time. You need to get good at going fast. So fast needs to feel easy. And that's kind of the underlying principle behind those top end efforts. So with hills specifically, you're gonna, the goal is to increase power output, increase efficiency by making your body adopt the most efficient form possible. When you're going faster, you're going to be forced to take on the most efficient biomechanics possible. So it's kind of like practicing perfection, but we can't do that all the time because that would make you hurt and would not be good for you. So we just do it for very specific occasions. But the more you practice it for just like 20, 30 seconds at a time, it's going to start to trickle down into all of your other efforts.
Totally. I think one thing that I want to say
yeah.
here is on your strides. You know, they should feel aerobically difficult, and same with your hills. You know, after each one, you should definitely be feeling out of breath. But if you go to the, you know, especially on your strides, if you go to the point where you have to walk on your recovery, you're completely undermining the intention of the workout. It's all about going fast and then going back to an easy effort, going fast and going back to an easy effort. You really need to be able to jog, you know, on those like after your intervals. And the same with on your workouts. If you're going so hard that you're buckled over and, you know, you can't run, even like little plodding easy steps, like you're going too fast.
And then that's how you know you're accidentally teaching yourself to run harder, not faster.
Right.
Because if you have to like hit the reset button, then you're not actually hitting an effort level that is sustainable or productive for your current fitness level.
And to develop those neural pathways, you really need to go from hard to easy, hard to easy, hard to easy. So that's why the workouts, you know, a lot of the workouts we do have a very generous amount of recovery time. And that's in order to help you start to like translate some of the biomechanical feedback that you're getting from the faster running into the easier running. The only exception to this is on your hills, which are a pure strength and power and cardiac stroke kind of workout. Like you should definitely feel the burn on every single one of those hills. And then, you know, it's appropriate to walk for like 20, 30 seconds after before you start jogging. That's, you know, we're really building strength. We're building, you know, you're developing your fast twitch muscle fibers, those outputs that like help you to run faster on your intervals and then on your easy runs later. So that's the only exception to that walking rule.
And, you know, when you see hills in the context of a workout, like especially if it's a longer hill interval, like 1 to 3 minutes, it is so key that you not walk during the interval. If you have to break form and power hike, that means you are going too hard or your hill is too steep and you need to moderate some aspect of how you're conducting that effort level.
Like on, you know, I think a lot of athletes who are training for ultras and mountain races, you see sort of progressions in your training, like 6 by 1 minute hills, then 5 by 2 minute hills, 5 by 3 minute hills. You know, as we sort of continue to develop the aerobic system and make the workload harder so you can continue to get better, you know, every one of those hills should be done in a way where it's hard, but sustainable. You should get to the top of that hill and be able to jog it back.
You don't want to go to failure.
Feel very good in those first 30 seconds recovering, jogging it back. But don't stop at the top of the hill. You know, try to turn around and jog it down. It's so much better for one, you know, in those moments we're actually working on lactate shuttling and things in these other systems that are really vital for increasing your efficiency as a runner in terms of like how the biology underneath the skin, what's happening there with the waste products that your muscles sort of start to develop on those tough, like high-end workouts. It's really important that you jog it down and you don't stop at the top and like huff. If you're doing that, you know, that means you gotta just dial it back a little bit. Drew or Kylee, do you guys want to talk a little bit about maybe some like long run intention?
I'll jump in real quick. Long runs, in my opinion, are the most important run of the week. So it's very important to have an intention and understanding of what the purpose is. Really, the long run serves as, it's multifaceted really in terms of what you're doing for. We're, I think, getting the best like pre-race effort, like in terms of like preparing both like physically, mentally, nutritionally, like what you're going to wear, like all that stuff. It's practice for your ultimate race, but also working on sustained efforts and I guess just I say it like this. When I do my long runs, a lot of my athletes are training for pretty much 50 miles and down. We do a lot of like play with pace as well. And so we do a lot of middle miles. And so the idea with that long run, in my eyes as a coach, is to try to get your ultimate goal, your end race goal, to be familiar and comfortable, that you're confident and stuff like that. A lot of that confidence with your race, say you're training for your first 100 miler or whatever, a lot of that confidence to finish that 100 miler or to, you know, run great at your 100 miler doesn't necessarily come from your hill repeats. It doesn't necessarily come from your strides. All of that serves a great purpose. But if you're dominating your long runs and feeling strong, your confidence builds, your body gets stronger, you're a more fit human. There's just so many benefits to, I guess, that long run. So it's important to understand that, so that when you go in and you're like, okay, this long run, I don't want to half-ass it. I don't want to feel like I'm tired and I'm just going to quit. You know, you have to go into it knowing that it's the most important run of the week. And don't know if Kylee wants to add on to that or not.
Not a ton to add, but yeah, I completely agree. In regards to for a lot of my athletes that are, you know, if they're racing at high altitude or something, I'll have them, I want them to get up high on some of their long runs. And then the same thing with, I like how Drew brought up the nutrition piece. Obviously, that's a huge part of what I do with people. But with all my athletes in Microcosm I work with, I'm like on their case about nutrition every single long run. And I'm like, what's your plan? How are you going to carry this? And if, you know, if they don't do it, then that's kind of on them on race day. But I can't overstress how much you want to use the long run to practice what you are going to do on race day. Obviously, things can happen on race day, but the idea is that you are setting yourself up for the greatest chance for success. And so that's I would say that's one of the biggest things that I like to emphasize with the athletes that I'm working with. And don't just, you know, I really like when my athletes think about, you know, where am I going to do my long run this weekend, and like have intentionality behind, like, you know, what is the purpose of this weekend's long run. You know, I do have athletes that plan that out and like tell me what they're going to do ahead of time, and it's really great. Then I feel like I know that they're engaged, and then I know that like we're really thinking about, okay, you know, what's the end goal, like what are we trying to do here? So I think that's really important.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
actually, can I touch on?
Go for it.
So I think
Yeah.
I think like Drew and Kylee both illustrate two of my favorite things about long runs. And Drew's point, and I think this is like one of the things I really love about Drew's style of coaching, specifically that I've started to adapt into my style of coaching a lot more, is bringing in intentional intensity into long runs. And something that I kind of is like a red flag for me in athletes training. If, you know, it's different if someone's doing like a mountainous long run, but if your long runs are at a pace that's like significantly slower than your easy days, that likely means that it potentially means that you're doing your easy days a little too fast. Like, let's say you have a 5 mile easy day and you're doing it at 11-minute pace, and then your long run is at 14-minute pace. It's kind of like, oh, there's a mismatch here. Like, eventually we want to get to a place in training where that long run is at like your paces are like some of the fastest of the week, because it needs to be a very strong run. We don't want to practice slogging. And so like one of the things that Drew, you'll see a lot of in like his marathon training that we are actually adapting into a lot of our ultra training is bringing in like either tempos or like, oh, hit your marathon effort level here in your middle miles and sustain that. Like, we want to have really strong intentional long runs, not to just go out there and hike for like 6 to 8 hours, because that becomes pretty counterproductive. It's like not a great use of your time. It can become an injury risk, particularly if you're not feeling very well. And then just to underline Kylie's point, I've actually started to have all of my athletes track their calorie input during their long runs. I started to notice, particularly with my incredible female athletes, a lot of people were intentionally really under fueling and just hitting like 100 or 150 calories an hour, or they weren't starting long enough, or they'd be like, oh, I just ate a Cliff Bar halfway through. And I'm like, no, like 500 miles in the middle of a long run is not the same as 250 calories every single hour. And we really need to start practicing fueling, because if you it's a huge risk on those days specifically, particularly for female athletes. There's a huge increased risk if you experience within day energy deficits. And then also, if you're just not getting in the amount of carbohydrates you need, you're not going to be able to hit the intensities that you want to hit in your long runs. And that doesn't mean you're tempoing the whole long run. It just means like you need to have readily available carbohydrates in order for your long run to be a beneficial training experience. And then if you're not practicing those things in the context of your long runs, if you show up on race day and are expecting to eat like a boss, like think again. The same way that you have to practice running, like anything, like your gut is a trainable muscle. And so often when people tell me that they're not good at eating, I just think they're not good at practicing eating. And long runs are a really incredible time to do both of those things. So I think, shifting the focus away from long runs being like, just like a, they're a really critical training tool for both of the reasons that Kylee and Drew underlined.
Yeah, and I think that we see really, through those illustrations and what we've discussed here is that, like a easy run or a recovery run or a forever effort run, those are all kind of locked into the same thing. It's like aerobic threshold and below runs. That's the kind of the bread and butter. That's what you're doing. Probably for most people, 80 to 90% of the time. We've got some moments of focused intensity, whether they're intervals that are, there for the sole purpose of developing economy or building your aerobic system or targeting a specific energy zone or energy system, or if they're there for, developing strength and power, like the hills. That's all pretty cut and dry. But when we think about the long run, it's so much more multifaceted. And it always kind of relates directly back to the event that you're training for. And in periods of base building, I really like to have athletes just kind of focus on an effort that feels comfortable, where they're, feeling like very smooth. They're not really forcing it. And then often, during those base building periods, the coach for an athlete can kind of start to add in some moments of intensity, because it's important to be able to like pick it up a little bit. And that helps you to kind of build your aerobic capacity, get used to running a little bit faster. But, very clear goals like Kylee and Drew mentioned, it's getting comfortable, getting ready for race day, making sure that you're dialing in your fueling, just so critical. You can't let that kind of go by the wayside. And again, if you're running high, if you're going to be up doing your race at altitude, trying to, take the time, if it means getting up a little bit earlier and driving, an extra hour to get up there, you'll be very grateful that you went up and got up high, got to altitude to practice some of these runs, because the way that you eat, the way that you feel and drink, it all changes when you get to altitude. So if all you're doing is, running in Denver and then you're racing in Silverton, that could be, very challenging when you're dealing with like a 5,000 foot elevation difference. We see this sometimes with our coastal athletes in the Pacific Northwest and things like that, where, not enough time spent up high, but then the race is up high, and then it's totally different for the digestive system. Your needs, your sodium needs, your hydration needs go up when you get up to elevation. You have to be able to tolerate taking that in and to be able to metabolize it. So, practicing those things and being intentional. Kylee, did you wave at me? Did you want to add on something? I thought I saw one of these.
Just like affirming wave.
Yeah.
From the nutritionist.
Anyways, I hope this helps. I think something that I've been thinking about a lot in my long runs is just trying to be very smooth and not necessarily, I don't know, for whatever reason, this last training block for me, my long runs haven't felt as good as I would like. So I've changed my intention a little bit to the fueling and just trying to feel really smooth out there and not force the speed. and not force the higher efforts if it's not coming
Yeah,
naturally.
to that point, my goal on long runs lately, particularly in exploring more technical terrain that's not exactly like, half marathon PR territory, my focus and my goal has been on moving well through the terrain, because something I see in myself that I see in a lot of athletes is they'll get down on themselves. They'll be like, oh my God, I'm going so slow. And like, yeah, if you're running at 12,000 feet, like over a mountain pass, like you're not going to be fast. No one's going to be fast. It's like you're grading yourself on an impossible curve. So set the expectation to kind of be adjustable and move well through the terrain that you're in. Like if your brain is telling you that you're moving slowly because you're going slower over a mountain pass than you would in your neighborhood, like that is correct. No one is going to go the same speed. That would be crazy. Like, so make sure that you are setting yourself up for healthy expectations, because one of the things that we'll see actually slows people down even more than terrain is like people getting down on themselves, like, oh, I'm moving so slow. Like if you tell yourself you're moving well for the terrain that you're in, that's a much healthier way of approaching a long run, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. And maybe trying to move with a little extra purpose through those
Move
sections.
with purpose, move well. That doesn't mean being like, oh, it's, I'm gonna move well. Like, give yourself adjustable goalposts, because that'll actually help keep you moving forward more efficiently than like beating yourself up over like the facts of physiology in the alpine.
Yeah. Cool. A couple other things that came through in the chat box. Matt had mentioned, getting used to wearing your full kit that you would wear on race day. That's huge, right? Like if you're going to be running with more gear at your race and you've done all of your runs like super minimal with a very light pack or just like a handheld, yeah, the running is going to feel like it has more resistance. There's going to feel like there's more resistance on your body on race day because you're hauling more gear. Even if it's an extra water bottle, it's still more. So you definitely want to practice that and make sure that you're familiar with all of your stuff and that it works well, and where you're putting your gels and where they're easy to access, where you put your raincoat and all of these things. Have that down to kind of like, so you really want to develop the muscle memory and know where all your stuff is for race day. So there's no question. I do want to transition over to some nutrition related stuff. We had a really good question about electrolytes. And then also Chris had a question about, fueling at higher altitude. So, maybe Kylee can help address some of these things. The first question here is, lately I've been trying to get more electrolytes in during my long runs. It's hot and I sweat a lot. My sweat often tastes salty. I've been finishing some runs feeling nauseous. Do you think this could be from lack of electrolytes or possibly a result of too much? Kylee, would you be able to enlighten us on this?
Honestly, just to interject, I feel like my ideal radio show would be Car Talk, but for ultra runners. Like, I just want to hear the Car Talk guys have this discussion.
Really?
Yeah, like just figuring out like weird ultra gut mysteries, but like with old Boston accents.
That's funny.
Sorry,
I think
Kylee.
that's the Science of Ultra podcast.
I'm sure that this podcast already, it's like, oh, what we need is two white dudes talking about ultra fueling. Like, what a concept. But we need that, but with NPR level production.
That would be fun.
I'm just saying there's not enough space in our culture where men can talk about science and running. We need to make more space for it. Anyway.
Sensing heavy sarcasm there, everybody. Okay, Kylee, nutrition.
So I did a YouTube live last night with some Spartan athletes about this same question, and unfortunately it's not straightforward, which is not surprising, but yeah, it can be either one of those things, whether you're not getting enough electrolytes or you're getting too much electrolyte. And so that can cause nausea. So can not getting enough fluids. So can not getting enough calories. So can getting the wrong mixture of sugars. So there's like a number of different things that can cause nausea. And it's not just related to like, just electrolyte, just, some people don't think of the fluid aspect or the calorie aspect or the sugar aspect. So that's where you kind of need to troubleshoot, and I highly recommend doing a very detailed look at your fueling plan. So breaking, when I work with athletes, we are literally breaking down the hydration mix, the gels, the food options into what types of sugars are in those products, how much are you getting in per hour, how much carb are you getting in per hour, how much electrolyte, how much fluid. So like everything needs to be broken out and analyzed. Even my own athletes with Microcosm, I typically will have them do something like that. And if you put in the effort, it's worth it if you can kind of really take a deep dive into that. If your stomach isn't that sensitive, you might be able to get away with more, but the problem is you're still, if you're just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna combine these things on race day, or I might try a quesadilla on race day, and I've never done that before.
I had a
you could
dime for
potentially
every time someone starts a login tree with, and I tried a quesadilla.
I'm like, well, you might end up with stomach issues. You're still taking a risk, even if you have an iron stomach. So oftentimes that might not catch up to you until 4 or 5 hours into a race. So if you are doing something longer and you have you're like, oh well, I practiced a little bit in my training and didn't have any issues, but it wasn't very organized, then that you could end up with issues still on race day because you haven't really done a 100-miler in your training. So really, I would say no matter who you are, you should be practicing and dialing it in before race day. And the nausea so there's not a simple answer for the nausea. Once you get to that point where you're nauseous, some people are like, oh, I'll use like ginger chews or something to try and calm the stomach down. While those can be band-aids to try and help you calm the stomach so you can take things in, they're not going to solve the problem unless you can figure out what the issue is, or like what caused that issue.
Kylee, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would assume that if a runner was running in hot conditions or sweating a lot, and they were on the fence about, am I taking too much electrolytes or not enough, that it's probably better to err on the side of more than less. Having more obviously can cause the nausea among any things like Kylee mentioned, but not having enough can put you in a dangerous position.
Well, I would say that both are going to put you in a dangerous position, because I do have athletes that they're popping salt pills like every 5 seconds, and it's like, that's not good either. Because what that's going to do is you take in a bunch of salt pills at one time, and that's a lot of molecules in the stomach. And essentially, if you're taking in fluids as well, it's just going to sit there. And also from your blood plasma, that concentration gradient difference is going to draw fluids from outside of like your small intestine and your stomach and draw it in, which can cause like sloshing stomach and cramping and all those things. So I agree. I just think that, sometimes people are on the other end of the spectrum when you say that. So
No, thank you for the clarification. That helps a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's, with all of these things, like, I wish there was a way to be like, if you get in this many calories and this much electrolytes, you will never have a problem and you will be good to go. It is just that easy. But like, humans are crazy. Your GI tract is crazy. You're all running at different places. Your fitness level affects your ability to do this. And it really takes, on one hand, you could do trial and error, but you could also work with a professional to analyze these things. And that's definitely, a route that, like, if this is something you struggle with persistently, maybe trial and error, like if you're erring on the errors, if you're really in that error side of that spectrum, maybe consider working with a professional like Kylee to dial in that, that stuff. Because if you're just like, oh, I was nauseous, so I'm going to Google I'm nauseous while running, and then you like pull up whatever the third Google recommendation is, and you're like, awesome, perfect, Google says I need to eat way more quesadillas, problem solved, I'm going to do that at my next ultra. I probably don't even need to try it because I heard about it on a podcast and these guys have never been wrong. Like, don't do that. Like, trial and error, work with a professional, what like one person on the internet says is like not always going to be what works for you. What your running partner does may not be what works for you, because you guys, it's so individualized. So, you know, and these things are all, I think, you know, Kylie summed it up really well. Like nausea can be caused by too much, not enough of like anything. So
Yeah, and so Kylie, kind of what I'm hearing is that if your sweat tastes salty, that's not necessarily an indication that you need to have more salts.
Yeah, exactly. You, yeah.
That's
So, I think, you know, I have, the thing to keep in mind is you're trying with fueling, you're trying to minimize the hole that you're digging yourself into, because we really aren't able to replace the amount of sodium, fluid losses, calories that we're burning or getting rid of during exercise. So we're trying to minimize that hole or gap, and trying to get through our event that way. So keeping in mind that, you know, I have an athlete that got a sweat test done. He's pretty high level, and he was losing 3,000 milligrams of sodium an hour. He's not replacing 3,000 milligrams of sodium an hour in his, you know, training. So that's an extreme example, but you know, if you're questioning or having issues, I highly, kind of like Zoe said, like this is one of the areas where I do kind of push working with someone on your fueling. And you know, I will have people get sweat tests done if it's a really, you know, difficult case where they're doing a lot of good things, but we really need to dial in the details. So there can be a lot of variability in regards to like sodium losses, fluid losses, all that kind of stuff.
Totally. What about when we put altitude when we bring in altitude into the equation?
Yeah, so typically at higher altitudes, you're gonna be respirating more, so you're going to lose more fluid and lose more electrolyte. So keeping in mind that what you're doing at even 5,000 feet compared to 9,000 feet, or sea level compared to, you know, 7,000 feet or whatever, is your needs are going to be different. Typically you can adjust to that, but it does take a little bit of time for your body to kind of recalibrate. So if you are racing at a higher altitude, you should just be prepared to, you know, I kind of base it on like when I'm chatting with someone, like, are you a heavy sweater or not? And then we can kind of talk about, okay, what would be an appropriate amount to kind of increase that electrolyte or fluid. So, you know, the general rec is like, some people might even need to increase their fluids by like a liter an hour or something. So it could be pretty significant if you're not used to high altitudes. But again, it's going to be individualized. So I wouldn't necessarily say like if you like read something online, you know, that's going to apply to you. You kind of have to maybe either chat with someone or experiment with some things. And also keeping in mind that your caloric expenditure is typically a bit higher at altitude too. So you might need a little bit more in the way of calories and carbohydrates as well.
What do you think is probably the higher end of what an athlete, you know, a well-trained athlete could metabolize per hour?
It depends on the intensity of the effort and like the distance of the event. So when we're looking at carbohydrates per hour, you know, that upper end is typically around 90 grams of carbs an hour, which is around 360 calories. But you can also get in a little bit, you know, of protein, etc. Some athletes can push that, you know, the same person that's 3,000 milligrams sodium loss can take in 120 grams of carbs per hour as well. So some people might be a little bit more able to tolerate that, but I don't suggest if someone is doing, you know, 40 grams of carbs an hour to go up to 90 grams of carbs an hour. So you can actually, like, your body and your gut can adapt to an increased calorie, increased carbohydrate intake, but it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with like practicing that on your long efforts. So I do have athletes that will take in for like some longer ultra events, 400 or 500 calories an hour. They're also getting in a little bit of protein, maybe a little bit of fat as well as they get further into the event, because the intensity level is going down a little bit. And in that situation, the blood is actually like not diverted away from the gut as much as it is at higher intensities. So keeping in mind, like, if you're doing a half marathon or a marathon, you don't want to be taking in like 400 or 500 calories an hour. If you're doing something longer, you probably will want to maybe push up towards, 300-400 calories an hour.
Depending on how hard you're going.
Well, yeah, but I still think, most people in an ultra can train themselves to get in probably between 300 and 400 calories an hour. Again, minimizing the losses here. So you're going to be burning a lot in an ultra event, even if you're going slower. So trying to minimize those losses. And it's going to be individualized based on body size as well. And kind of keeping in mind, like, if you have a smaller frame, then yeah, maybe you don't need quite as much. But for a lot of us, the limit on carbohydrates per hour that we can take in is pretty consistent in regards to, like, the reason why it's limited is because there's a limited number of transport channels for sugars. So a lot of us have that similar amount of transport channels in our small intestine, and that's why there's like that upper limit for carbs. It can vary a little bit, obviously, but yeah, that's kind of why you don't necessarily want to be doing like 1,000 calories an hour or anything.
Whoa.
Yeah, that could be really tough to
Just housing like a
metabolize.
meatball sub during an ultra. Dreams.
Yeah,
goals.
that's amazing. I mean, I think it's really interesting to see how, that level of calorie intake kind of changes on, for a well-trained athlete who's practiced these things, really changes from, marathon to 100-miler. So like when you're running 100, you could be pushing 350 calories an hour or 400 calories an hour. But when you're running a marathon, there's a lot less blood in the digestive system. It's a lot of that is going to the skin to keep you cool. It's going to the muscles to keep you running fast. That, you could develop GI issues in a shorter ultra marathon, like a marathon 50K and down, if you're really trying to just like crush all of those calories and you're running too fast. Kylee, just to kind of follow up, and maybe this will be helpful in maybe the last minute here. You said maybe the higher end of that carbohydrate load is 120 grams per hour. Like the most.
No, that is going to be an extreme example again.
Okay.
So,
so
90 grams. Yeah, so 90 grams of carbs an hour, though there are certain athletes that might be a little bit higher level that have, pushed 110, 120 grams of carbs an hour. Like Kipchoge has done 110 grams an hour. So yeah, and then the other athlete that I've worked with a little bit is a very high level Ironman athlete. And so like they are, that elite level, and they've been pushing some of these limits because that's their main job, is doing that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
I also identify as an elite level nutrition limit
you've really
pusher.
like started pushing your limit. You're doing like 300 to 400 calories in your 50K and had no GI issues.
Rocked it.
That's unbelievable.
Crushed it.
I am not there. Working on it.
I mean, honestly, getting to that level made me like, it felt like I was running with a different body and a different brain. Like I was hitting you know, I always thought like, oh, you're going to inevitably hit a low during an ultra. And I realized that a lot of the lows I was hitting in previous races were because of insufficient fueling for my effort level.
I mean, it really, that drop
It wasn't
off.
just because I was like mentally weak or something. I wasn't really doing like 100 calories every 20 minutes.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
It changed my life.
I'm continuing to try to push. I
Work
remember
with
for me,
Kylee.
it was like a breakthrough when I got to do 300 calories an hour.
Yeah, it makes running so much, like, I wouldn't say like running ultra is necessarily easy, but you're making it way freaking harder on yourself if you're not eating like it's the number one priority out there.
Yeah, it really is. And sticking to that schedule.
Yeah.
So you don't
And like, even if
forget.
your stomach doesn't feel that great, like, eat.
Well, cool. Thank you. I hope everybody found this helpful. You know, ideally we've got a few more good questions here that we'd love to address on Monday. So hopefully we'll see you all then. And I hope everybody gets to do some really cool adventures this weekend. Don't be scared
Don't
of
get eaten by a
wildlife.
bear.
Bring a whistle, whatever you
Bring
need.
a whistle and bring a ton of food.
And eat really well. Thank you guys. Have a great weekend.